You have to go, but for those of you who still have a few minutes, can we please have Raymond Ndlovu, who is the chairman of the Cape Wine Auction, Professor John Volmink, who is the chairman of Umalusi, Trevor Manuel, and Varda Conrad. So I want to give an opportunity for Professor Volmink and Raymond, who have been sitting here quietly and listening to all of this, to share with us a little bit of their response to this. But I want to preempt it, and I want to be bold by saying to you, the last few months have been exceptionally difficult for me, in that I wake up every day thinking, why do I bother? Because no one else seems to care about this. So, John, how do we get business to step up and do what Trevor has talked to us now, and what do we do to not give? Because there are many of us in this room who are kind of tired now. We need business to step up. How do we get that done?
Okay. Well.
Hello.
So Louise, you know, I'm sitting here thinking there's a whole room full of very smart people with good hearts, with a spirit of generosity, a spirit of open-heartedness, and a spirit of open-handedness. And then I see here, all of us together can't move the needle. So why? That's the problem. We sit here with pockets full of good intentions. So why aren't we moving the needle? That's the question. Otherwise, this will just become one more night where we sit and listen to... I can listen to Trevor all night. I mean, he's one of my heroes. So I can listen to him all night, and he's inspirational. And so are all the other speakers. So maybe I should just... Let me take... Is it Wendy? Yeah. Wendy, because she summarized it for me. 3 things. One is collaboration. That's why we're ineffective. We don't collaborate. And partnership, which is the root word, is not just about how I can help you and you can help me, but how together can we make a difference that we otherwise would not be able to. That's a challenge. And what we've done is we have what I call institutionalized privatism. We've institutionalized that. So we each work in our own corners, and we wait for the applause of people. Collaboration, thanks, Wendy. I mean, I can go on about this, because she's timing me. So, secondly, you said simplicity. I love that. Because I believe the world is a very complex place. And we must seek simplicity. And there are 2 kinds of simplicity. There's a simplicity, this side of complexity. That is simplistic. That is what apartheid was. Apartheid never dealt with the complexity of this society. So they came up with a few simplistic rules. And we can do the same in education. So recognizing that it is complex, that we must aspire and desire simplicity. And not simplistic, but profundity. There's a simplicity this side, the near side of complexity, and there's a simplicity the far side of complexity. What's the third thing you say? Yeah. Well, you know, I think that here we are. It's a collective of people, a collective of talent, of resources, of funding, of approaches, of organizations. And I think, Paula, you said, we have to recognize this as an ecosystem. We are all tied together, we are all bound together in the ecosystem. So impact won't happen until we realize what Paula said, is that each part of the ecosystem is dependent on the other. And I don't have time to expand on that. So the last thing, Dion, I mean, I like what your approach is what I think Trevor talks about, active citizenry. You know, let me just say this, if I can borrow another 30 seconds, 20 seconds. She said 30 is too much, but you know, my life was changed when, after I spent 10 years in America, at the Ivy League university, and I walked, and the University of Natal at the time asked me to come and be at the core of what was an untransformed university. I said, I can't do that. I will come if you allow me to work on the boundary where the university meets the community. Then I will have 1 foot in the university, 1 foot out. And then I can make sure that innovation flows both ways, both into the university and out of the university. And my life changed. I don't have time to say, but what you're doing is how you start. You have to get personally involved. So we need to change. Louise, this is really the last sentence. And we need to do, how do people change? You don't change until you feel a malcontent, a discontent. You must feel unhappy. And then you must articulate that unhappiness. You can't just feel unhappy. Then you get depressed. Huh? But why am I so, why is this malcontent in me? And it changed for me, personally, when my thinking, my feeling ended up in acting. You can't just think, and you can't just feel outrage. You have to bring those two together by acting. And Trevor, thank you for pointing out this notion of active citizenry. Paula, I just want to go back to your last thing now. So you said something that I didn't hear the applause, but I agree with you, that we should allow government to lead. You know, so we must say and the education department must take the lead. That doesn't mean we just walk behind, but the education department is the convening authority, right? So the convening authority means they just organize everybody, but we all have to work. The education department has a legislative responsibility to deliver. That's not my responsibility. And so I just want to say I agree with you. And Trevor, you said something. Trevor and I go back, he can explain, but we go back a long way. But this notion, not only of active citizenry, but systemic change. As you know, I work at Umbalusi. Now, every year, you hear me say, there were no systemic irregularities. Now, there will always be acts of dishonesty in any exam anywhere in the world. There are individual acts of dishonesty, but that doesn't mean that there's systemic dishonesty. So the challenge for us is, we can, each one of us, and I'm sure we can sit here all night, get up and say, here are some things that I'm doing individually, as an organization or as an individual. But that doesn't mean that there is systemic change. That is our challenge. We have to understand the systemic nature of change, not just individual points of light. Bring it together some way or the other.
Thank you. So let's. So all my heroes here are here at the front. Raymond, you here today as the chairman of the Cape Wine Auction, but also as a senior leader at Remgrow. I wake up every day thinking, how can we get business leaders to step up and lead together and not abdicate responsibility for their education system to the CSI department, but actually realize that CEOs have a role to play. And Trevor did a strong call to action there, and we're going to call him on that because we're not going to let him away. We need to mobilize business. The CEO initiative to date have been prioritizing lots of other things, but they're not prioritizing education. How do we get them to prioritize education? How do we get everybody in this room to prioritize education? I know it's their choice, but what can we do to facilitate that?
Thank you. I think the benefit of sitting in many different fora, as I do, one gets to see exactly what tends to move CEOs to action. And over the last couple of years, it's really undoubtedly, singularly been state capture. I've happened to be in the room at BLSA when we are sitting down and having crisis meetings with the president, or trying to have crisis meetings with the president, because the institutions of state are crumbling. And to Trevor's earlier point, when there is a singular, common and clear present danger that forms a crisis, it trains people's minds on it. And what's critical is when business leaders recognize that there's an existential threat, not only to their businesses, but broadly to society as a whole. And I don't think that across the board over the years, we've actually clearly articulated the crisis of education, or crisis in education, and its impact on our future, because it's abdicating the responsibility for our present. And that, therein lies the challenge. Now, how do we actually move to a process or a place of identifying what the crisis is and bringing it to the center stage of how to deal with it? I think all of the people that spoke here today have clearly got a very good grasp of it. But the big challenge is it's out there. It's not the Rand crashing. It's not the Reserve Bank under threat. It's not very real business things that tend to immediately occupy the mind space of CEOs. That's not to say they're not concerned about it, but it's certainly not front and center. So I think that's the challenge. And this is my third gathering in 3 years of this nature that brings together different business and NGO organizations in the discussion around education. And the one thing that is clearly missing is not the will to collaborate. It's basically the direction of energy and presence of mind to create very real census and consensus. Who's in the room? What are you doing? What are you working on? It's a database. We do that all the time. But we just haven't managed at this point in time to actually create one singular conversation around what then creates the conducive basis, first of all, to mobilize the people, the minds, the hearts, and resources, that there is a crisis, define it, be clear on it, and move. But secondly, what will it take? Now seriously, what will it take for every single profit-making organization to engage its primary focus as education or improving educational outcomes in its immediate vicinity? That's what we require. We need to talk to your big, hairy, audacious goal. I don't for any single minute doubt the willingness and the desire, the humility, the passion, the commitment. All of these things are in the room. They're always in the room. That's not what's lacking. What's lacking is a sense of urgency and a sense of complete and utter almost panic.
So we know, thank you. And I guess that's our collective challenge, is that if we are not panicking now, what will it take for us to panic? 78% of the children in our country at grade 4 cannot read. They're never going to be able to get a job. They're going to be unemployed. They're going to become grant dependent. What will it take for us to, for people to realize that there's a crisis? CEOs today, it's because you're right. It's not in our immediate. It's not in our. We can act as if it doesn't matter, or we can leave it to the education department, and then we can say, well, it's the education department's job. But it is a crisis now. What will it take for people to recognize that it's a crisis, Trevor?
Look, I think that the organizations are going to be important. The BLSA, BUSA are going to be important in this regard. You must speak and you must present and you must give people no option about what to do. I don't think that the struggle has been taken into where business leaders sit together. And for me, that's the big challenge. And you know, the problem about South Africa is that wealthy people can opt out. So the people you talk to have probably all put their children through private schools. They never encounter the poverty. They never encounter the dysfunctionality that is an everyday experience for too many people in the country. That's what you've got to put in the boardroom and give no option about it. And I think it requires a coordinated endeavor in rapid fire to be able to get at the issue. So that, I'm saying, that's why the National Peace Accord for me it was eventually concluded, negotiated in 1990, but the efforts started earlier because people realized that there was no way out. And yeah, I mean, it's like saying to the country, sever a limb because you're not going to need it in the future. And it's completely silly to act in this way. And that's why the change has to start. I didn't go into it because I was scared of Warda earlier. So I spoke about, but now that we've spoken, it's okay. But ECD is actually the big change, and you can see where children come from. And unless we understand that as critical to unlocking foundation phase education, yeah, whatever Amalusi does on the 5th of January or the 6th of January. Already you're dealing with a minority of people who started out. Yeah. It's changing that is the big challenge for all of us. Thanks.
Varda, and I'm conscious of, I know we can all stay here the whole evening, but we did promise you that you can go. So Varda, we have an expectation that that the education department will lead, and it'd be interesting to just hear your perspective. For years and years and years, the Education Department in the Western Cape have said, we can do it alone. We don't need your help. I'm hearing a change. I'm hearing Brian talk repeatedly about the fact that you need help, that we need everybody in this room to. Can you just, for those of us who've not been in the room when Brian speaks about that, can you just articulate the position from the Western Cape Education Department with regard to partnership, business involvement, and do the call to action? Why should we care?
It's been easy to fight apartheid because that was a common enemy. Our common enemy now is poverty. Our common enemy now is the inequality gap. No one in this country can claim to be able to do it themselves, no organization, no single human being. So, in the past, and it's true that the Western Cape Education Department has had a particular view about NGOs and interference, largely brought upon by the fact that people outside of education do presume to want to tell education what to do. Let's call it, because, Trevor, we need to be brave. So there's that. But there is also the fact that we have to accept codependency. We all in it together. And if we accept that we have a new common enemy, it means that we have to have cognizance of our common fate within this space. And if we have cognizance of our common fate, and we know exactly what our common purpose is, and the common purpose in the Western Cape in education is clear. It's quality education for every child. Not the richest of the rich, not the super talented who get snatched out of these schools and punked into Model C schools and then left to survive and assimilate. Regardless of their culture, they must assimilate. Yeah, I'm calling that too. The time, Louise, I mean, I don't know how. Just stop. Just stop and think, look in the mirror, do a Michael Jackson, and ask yourself, what is the one thing, just one thing, that you can do tomorrow that is going to change the life of every child in this province? Just one thing. And that's the call that I'm making to you.
I'm sorry, I don't want to speak too much, and I don't want to look for trouble with Walter, certainly not. But while we're friends, let me take advantage. I think that the common enemy, I think that poverty and inequality are outcomes. No, I think poverty and inequality are outcomes. I think that the common enemy is mediocrity and the absence of consequence. And if we then begin to engage that, then we ask of every person in the system, what do you do to make a change? You ask this teacher who gives children the tests and the answers before they write it. You say, what do we do to change you or to exit you? Because we can't have mediocrity. In well-governed schools, you're not going to have that happen. And so, you know, it's that kind of issue. It's that kind of issue that we have to engage. And you know, on the issue of state capture, it's been the absence of consequence that has allowed people to get away with what they have. And part of what we need to do now is to have consequences, not just for corruption, but for everything that people do wrong. And then I think you begin to change the culture in society, and you begin to root out mediocrity, and we can draw examples from across the world of where the change has actually happened. On the African continent, like Tito Mboweni, I'm going to say, look to Rwanda and look what they've achieved after the genocide. It's truly amazing, in education especially.
So, the invitation to everybody in this room is to get actively involved. On the 1st of August, we are arranging Execs Back to School. We've done it last year in Joburg, and what's happened is that these business leaders who are not yet ready to do what Dion's doing, but he's willing to give one day to go and walk in the moccasins of a school principal and learn something about that challenge. This is your opportunity. We have school principals who've opened their schools to you. They're willing to have you with them for a day. They're going to give you the opportunity to feel what it feels like. And then from that, there's new knowledge in the system. And ultimately, that's what we need to do, is we need to create new knowledge, new understanding, new insights while we mobilize business to get actively involved. So we want to invite you to the 1st of August to become part of Execs Back to School. I want to say thank you to these amazing people who have all contributed their time, everybody who came today. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being in the room. Our future is at stake, and what if we are the leaders we've been waiting for? What if this future is actually our legacy to build, and for us to create an alternative future for the children that we care about? It's our future, it's not those people's future. Thank you very much for everybody coming this afternoon. We appreciate you.